This is a theory of mine that explains why buying a camera in the age of incredible smartphone cameras is not a waste of money. I made this up, but hear me out. It will make sense, and there's even some academic research that backs it up. And no, it's not just going to be an excuse for you to spend more money on gear. I personally think this is an important concept to understand, so let's get into it. Just use your phone for photography, they say, and you know, that's a valid statement. If you've seen other videos of mine, you'll know that I actually kind of support this. One of my most viewed videos is literally about how I used, at that time, the iPhone 15 Pro as a travel video camera instead of my Sony camera. And I actually use my phone for photography a lot. And yet, I believe that there's a strongly valid reason to buy a camera for photography, a reason aside from the obvious technical stuff, I suppose. You know, a wildlife photographer is somewhat technically reliant on a capable camera setup, or likewise an astrophotographer. However, the kind of photography I do, everyday moments, travel, street photography, that type of photography is theoretically totally achievable with just a phone. So, why buy a camera? To explain the concept I want to present to you in this video, we need to define a couple things. This applies to people who actively pursue photography as a hobby, an artistic venture, or even professionally. However, if all you care about is getting a couple snapshots of your trip or your kids, then there's arguably a decent chance that using a camera instead of your phone will not really matter to you. It does matter for people who are actively trying to become better at photography. So, this is my theory. The tool you use has a strong influence on the enjoyment you feel when doing the activity. Enjoyment roughly equates to intrinsic motivation. Both enjoyment and intrinsic motivation lead to more activity, so more practice. And more practice tends to eventually lead to better results. So in the case of photography, my argument is that when you use a camera that you like, you enjoy photography more, which intrinsically motivates you to pick up the camera more often and practice photography more consistently. And it is this consistent practice that tends to lead to better results and improved skills in the long run. One of the most commonly spread advice that I've heard experienced and highly skilled photographers give to beginner photographers is to simply shoot more. It's an annoyingly basic tip, and it's especially annoying when one was hoping for that one secret trick or something that will improve one's photography. However, I think we all actually know that such a thing doesn't exist. This applies to any skill, not just photography. There are no shortcuts. Anything that is sold to you as a shortcut is just a short-term distraction from a long-term problem that requires a long-term solution. And this also applies to cameras. Please do not mistake my argument for camera industry propaganda that I just spread so that more cameras are purchased. Buying a camera will not magically make you a better photographer once you start shooting with it. However, I'm arguing that in the long run, it will be a meaningful contribution to you becoming a better photographer because it will make photography more enjoyable for you. Let's briefly look closer at my point about the camera not instantly making you better. The surface level obvious reason to buy a camera for photography is that the camera is technically superior to the phone. A proper camera has a bigger sensor, which allows for better performance in various situations, such as in dark lighting. You could choose different lenses, which are all of higher quality than the lenses built into a phone. However, the technical superiority of a proper camera does not make the user a better photographer. In fact, it might do the opposite. That is because it is precisely the technicality of a proper camera that can act as a barrier. Someone might find it hard to think of all the technical stuff when simply trying to take photos. That is why I do not fully disagree with the mobile photography proponents, because if an incredible photographer is held back by an unnecessarily technical tool, the results are probably going to be better when that photographer just uses a phone and snaps away without thinking about the technicals. One point I also need to briefly talk about is editing, because this is part of the technicality issue. One misunderstanding that I commonly encounter is that a camera will give your photographs a look. And I completely get it. Someone who's only ever shot with their phone and is considering to buy a camera might think, oh, I'd like a camera that shoots, I don't know, nostalgic looking photos. I think that's not a far-fetched assumption. However, that is actually not how cameras work. The look, be it a warm look or a high contrast look, all of those stylistic decisions are actually done in the editing process. The camera barely has any influence on that, at least when shooting it raw. It just lays at the base for you, and it does that much better than a phone because of the mentioned technical superiority. The files a proper camera produces are more easily editable than the files from a phone. Anyway, the technical side of photography doesn't have to be that hard or complex. There's a middle ground, which is actually where I like to be. I personally enjoy shooting in this middle ground. I do not need an incredibly high-end camera that can shoot technically impeccable photographs. I just need a camera, because using an actual camera is simply more fun than using a slate with the touchscreen, which brings me back to my core argument. I think this applies to many things. I'd rather drive a nice car than a bad car. The bad car will still take me from point A to point B, assuming it's functional, of course. But the nice car will make it more fun, which motivates me to drive it more often. It's the same with cameras, and we, luckily, live in this incredibly camera-rich time where there's a big variety of cameras to choose from. You can get something big and bulky because you like the feeling of this heavy piece of equipment in your hand, or you can get something small and inconspicuous because you appreciate the convenience. So I think the reason to buy a camera is actually not a technical reason. The reason is the process, a process that can be more enjoyable when done with a more enjoyable tool. And while a proper camera will shoot technically better photographs, it's the enjoyment that is going to make the real difference, because the person using the camera, you, the photographer, will become better at the skill of photography. And by the way, this is the main reason why I mostly shoot film. Rationally, film photography makes little sense because it is technically inferior and economically insensible. However, me and a bunch of other people prefer to shoot film. And why is that? Well, I don't know about the others, I can only speak for myself, but for me, it's simply because I think it's way more fun to shoot film and use a film camera. And fun in the process leads to better photos. You simply can't beat someone who's having fun. By the way, in case you have a little collection of shots that you like, you should make a portfolio, for which I recommend this channel's partner, Squarespace. If you need a portfolio website, an online shop, a freelancer's booking page, or anything, basically, Squarespace is the place to make it. I personally have been using Squarespace for over 5 years at this point, and I highly recommend it if you need a website. They have a bunch of professionally designed templates to start off from, and with their intuitive drag and drop editor, it is easy to customize the design to your liking. Or you can even use their AI tool, which will build you a website based on your description. And they are really all in one. You can register your own domain name with them, and they offer analytics to track the activity on your page. Personally, I think what they do really well, or what I appreciate, is that they give me creative freedom in combination with ease of use. Try it out for yourself. You can head to squarespace.com for a 14-day free trial, and then when you're ready to launch a website, you can go to squarespace.com/TeoCrawford to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. There is actually some research that helps explain why the experience of using a camera might matter. In 2014, researchers Chirasoli, Nicklin and Ford published a large meta-analysis looking at over 200,000 people across roughly 40 years of research. They examined the relationship between intrinsic motivation, doing something because it is enjoyable or satisfying in itself, and performance. They found that intrinsic motivation was positively associated with performance overall, but the relationship was particularly strong when the quality of the work mattered, rather than simply the quantity produced. Considered simultaneously through meta-analytic regression, intrinsic motivation predicted more unique variance in quality of performance, whereas incentives were a better predictor of quantity of performance. Photography is very much a quality-based activity. Taking more photographs does not automatically mean creating better ones. Good photography usually requires consistent attention, curiosity, experimentation, and a willingness to keep engaging with the process even when the result is disappointing. Another study, published by Davis, Bagozzi, and Washar, looked at why people choose to use certain technologies. They separated two different factors: how useful a tool is and how enjoyable it is to use. Unsurprisingly, usefulness was the more important factor, but enjoyment still independently influenced people's intention to keep using the technology. People did not choose tools purely because of what the tools could accomplish. The experience of using them did matter too. I think that distinction is important when comparing a camera to a phone. A phone may be the more convenient tool, it may be capable of producing almost everything you need, but if a dedicated camera makes you more excited to go outside, more attentive while shooting, or more willing to return to the process again and again, then that enjoyment is not irrelevant. So that is what brought me to this theory. Theory sounds a little pretentious, I suppose. This really isn't anything groundbreaking, it's just my conclusion of how one thing leads to another. Using a camera is more fun. More fun equals more intrinsic motivation, and as the study showed, more intrinsic motivation leads to higher quality results. So next time you have to justify yet another gear purchase, just reference this. I'm just joking, don't buy too much gear. One camera only will probably suffice. That is all I wanted to chat about with you today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Before saying goodbye, I would like to say a massive thank you to the lovely people supporting me and my work on Patreon. Thank you so much to each one of you. If you're interested in Lightroom presets, color grading tutorials and stuff like that, you could check out my page via the link in the description. Also, I have a print shop in case that is of interest to you, also in the description. With that said, I hope to see you again soon. Until then, goodbye.